Today for a Friday Farm Report, we are building out a 2025 roster based solely on homegrown talent for the Mets. Which prospects could be at the big league level contributing in a big way in a few years? We will discuss that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, for the purpose of this exercise today, we are looking at the players that will still be on this roster by 2025, the prospects who could arrive at that point, and just trying to understand where the Mets have depth long term to maybe better get a grasp of what they have to do this offseason to fill in those gaps that can't be solved with what is actually on the roster. What long-term contracts might be given out to kind of mitigate what you don't have coming through the pipeline. So the first thing we're going to start with here, players that the Mets will have control of. So Francisco Lindor, Starling Marte, Edwin Diaz, those are your guys who are on guaranteed big money major league deals. Lindor $34.1 million, Marte $20.75, Diaz $14.4. You put it all together, you're looking at about $70 million. Now there's still the arbitration players. There's still other things that would fill out that payroll, but if you go to Spot Track right now, I think the Mets payroll was shy of $100 million in 2025. It was like 93. That's projected. Who knows? I mean, we have no idea what else will happen by then, but it just shows you that you really are, coloring in a pretty wide open book here if you're looking towards a couple of years from now. Arbitration eligible players at this time. So this is in 2025. Louis Guillorme will be in his final year of arbitration, so that shows you have a quality, really good defensive utility player locked up for the next 3 seasons. Great to have. David Peterson will be ARB 2, so you'll have 2 years left of control of him. Tyler McGill, ARB 1, 3 years of control on him. So 2 pitchers that could be long-term starting options that you have for, when it comes to Peterson. You're looking at, 4 more seasons of control, McGill 5. Pre-arbitration players that are on the 40. The guys that we just saw this year, Francisco Alvarez, Brett Baty, Mark Vientos, Jose Budo, and Bryce Montes de Aca. You add all those guys together, and the 2 exceptions to my rule of not signing anybody else, adding to this team, or trading for someone else, and just focusing on homegrown players is 2 guys that are homegrown that I think will get contract extensions and will remain with the Mets. And that is Jeff McNeil and Pete Alonso. 2 years left to control for both of them. They technically could be free agents heading into 2025, but I think that resolves itself. And I also, just for simplicity, I'm bringing back Tomas Nido on a type of a friendly contract. I think he's the type of backup catcher that you just keep around for a long time. Kind of like you see, Martin Maldonado, who's been there for a long time in Houston. I just think that's what Nido's going to be for this club. I said it 2 years ago now that he was the backup catcher of the future, and I said it's kind of a backhanded compliment. I still believe that. So all of those players that we just mentioned, that adds up to 14 guys on a 26-man roster. You have at first base Alonso, second McNeil, short Lindor, third Baty, catcher Alvarez, Marte somewhere in the outfield, Vientos at DH, a utility infielder in Guillorme. You have 3 starters in Peterson, McGill, and Budo, 2 relievers in Edwin Diaz and Montes de Aca. So the needs are 2 other outfielders to flank Marte, however you want to, configure that outfield. Probably a 4th outfielder, 2 to 3 starting pitchers, and 6 relief pitchers. Can prospects fill all of those roles? And knowing that obviously other moves will be made, but this is, again, an exercise to understand the depth that exists in this organization. And there's some players that I think give you a lot of intrigue and promise here, where you're looking at the first wave of it now that we're going to see starting next season with Alvarez, Baty, and Vientos. But you also have coming down the line a Kevin Parada, and Alex Ramirez, a Ronny Mauricio. So I want to go through how those guys could fit in, and also how you would construct a starting lineup into the future without making any signing over the next 2 years that's more than a stopgap, a 1-year signing for a Conforto type, a Haniger, whatever it may be, to fill that need that Brandon Nimmo is leaving in your outfield, at least right now. Before we get to any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline, always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. You can find free agent betting. Where will Justin Verlander land? Will they have him as a favorite to land in New York at plus 375? If he does not, simply return to the Houston Astros. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. Bet online, where the game starts. Just based on the prospects in the Mets farm system, it's a lot more fun to dream about what the starting lineup can be in the future than the starting rotation. And that could sort of tip your hand, or tip the Mets' hand a bit, as to why they are so aggressive right now, seemingly, on that starting pitching market more than anywhere else, where they're maybe not as concerned about losing a Nimmo as opposed to losing DeGrom and Bassett and having no backup plan. They feel like they have to add a couple of arms. You look at the guys that I believe will remain in place. I already said Alonso coming back, McNeil coming back. If you know that you're going to have Jeff McNeil, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso as maybe your 1, 2, 3 for the next 5 years, with Baty and Alvarez being maybe your 4 and 5 hitters, I feel really good about that front five, about the prospect of Baty and Alvarez grabbing starting jobs as soon as this upcoming season and running with them and being above average big league contributors, keeping Lindor, you already have Lindor, but keeping McNeil and Alonso with Lindor as the veterans. That's a 5 that I can trust for a long time. Now, beyond that, you still have Starling Marte. So where do you play Starling Marte in 2025? There is a world where Starling Marte is the center fielder for the remainder of his contract, 3 more years out there. There is a chance that he's in center field just this year, and then the Mets make a move for a right fielder, or they make a move for a different center fielder that pushes him back into right. That's a possibility. Or maybe Starling Marte's defense regresses a little bit over the next couple of years, and by the time you get to the final year of that contract, you say, you know what? Go back out into left field where you started your career and won those Gold Gloves, and you could be the best defensive left fielder in baseball with your athleticism, but you can be protected a little bit. All of these things can happen. I have Marte in left field, and the reason why I have him in left field is because of the 2 prospects that I'm putting into the starting lineup, Ronny Mauricio and Alex Ramirez. And the 3 that we're adding to this roster when it comes to the top prospects by 2025 is those 2 guys and Kevin Parada. So we're going to begin with the maybe most surprising of my selections, I think, because I think everyone is hoping that Alex Ramirez can get there, and Kevin Parada as a DH secondary catcher could make some sense by the time you get to 2025 as well. Ronny Mauricio, though, is someone who I have been all over the place breaking down in this show. There's times where I point to the awful chase rates, the bad plate discipline, the fact that even if he hits for a high average, he's probably never going to get on base at a 320 clip or higher. And I just think that, there's a really good chance that Ronny Mauricio does not amount to being this superstar player. Yet, when I went out and I saw all the different teams in the Northeast this summer, and I visited all these farm systems, the player that jumped out to me based on eye test more than anyone else, no data, just watching the guys play, was Ronny Mauricio, because he has a superstar body. I mean, this guy put on, like 60 pounds of muscle, it feels like, over the last couple of years to go from a big old string bean to a filled out, chiseled, star-looking player who's out in the Dominican Republic right now in the Winter League with 12 doubles, 2 triples, 4 home runs in 37 games. He has an 853 OPS. He's driven in 28 runs. He has 8 stolen bases, too. They have moved him off shortstop. They moved him over to third base. I think long term, as I've said in the past, I keep coming back to Joey Gallo with Ronny Mauricio, and it's not necessarily based on their approach at the dish, because Gallo really disciplined in drawing walks. Mauricio's a lot more of a free swinger, so I think that the on-base percentage could be similar. It's just how you get to it, whereas Gallo might get to the 320 with a 190 average and drawing a bunch of walks, whereas Mauricio might not be drawing any walks. He might hit 290 with a 310 on base. I mean, he just doesn't really have it in him to really work counts and to be able to draw those walks. But if he can continue to hit and he can drive the baseball and he goes out next season in AA and AAA and hits 45 home runs, well, we're going to be trying to see where Ronny Mauricio fits in either at the end of next year or by 2024. And with Baty, I think, grabbing the third base job with Lindor at short, I see him getting pushed out to the outfield with his athleticism, particularly with a strong arm. I think you could groom him into being a quality right fielder, which is why I say Marte may be in left, because I like the idea of Mauricio being Mr. Ronnie right field out there. I think there's a chance that he breaks through and can be that guy. I'm not confident in it. If you had to tell me to bet my life savings on Ronnie Mauricio ever being an all-star right now, I would say no. But is it a possibility? Absolutely. And he is a guy that I hope I'm wrong on, and that all these years where I've doubted him and I've thrown him in every trade that we've discussed on this show, because I really think that he's going to get exposed by big league pitching. I hope I'm wrong, and what we're seeing, at least in this Dominican Winter League, is if I am wrong, the ceiling is just super, super high with this guy, and that's enough to dream on. And so in a podcast where we're simply dreaming, yes, he's the starting right fielder in 2025. Now, center field is a guy I'm a lot more confident in, and that's Alex Ramirez. They have his ETA, if you look at Baseball America, 2024. He turns 20 years old in January. So you're looking at him, turning 2021 ahead of the 2024 season. Did I say turning 2020? I might have said turning 2021. But you have him turning 21 years old ahead of the 2024 season when he could make his debut. He held his own in high A last year after being great in St. Lucie. A 757 OPS at 19 is really impressive in high A. Likely starts there again because, he only had the 50-plus games, but has a great start. You could see him in double next year. I think that's probably where he spends most of his time, in double A in 2023. Then 2024, maybe you begin the year in triple, and a good month or two and you're with the big league club, and he has a chance to be a five-tool type center fielder. That's what the Mets need. He is the prospect that I think, outside of Alvarez and Baty, he's certainly one that has the highest upside, but I think he's the most important prospect in this system outside of Alvarez. You need Alvarez to hit because he's here. And I don't just mean actually hit. I mean hit as a prospect where he's able to defend the catcher position and be that plus level hitter. And if that happens, and if Baty can be a good third baseman, then Ramirez comes through and he can be a legitimate player too. Now you're really cooking with a young core that could then be signed to extensions, and suddenly the team can become more affordable for Steve Cohen moving forward. So that really accounts for most of this group here. Kevin Parada, 21 years old, had an 880 OPS in 13 games in the minors last year. Very limited sample size after getting drafted in the first round. He had an OPS over 1,000, though, in 112 career games in college at Georgia Tech. So I can see Parada being a hitter that fast tracks through the Mets system. And so right now I have Vientos slated as the DH, but I think that could be Parada by 2025 as well. With all that said, starting lineup, again, top to bottom. McNeil at second, leadoff. Lindor batting second, playing short. Alonso batting third. playing first. That could be flipped the other way with Brett Baty if Baty continues to establish himself. I see Baty being maybe potentially the more well-rounded hitter compared to Alvarez, with Alvarez just being absurd pop. So that's your front five. Any combination of them. 6, I have Marte in left. 7th, I have Mauricio in right. 8th, I have Vientos or Parada at DH. And then center fielder batting 9th, Alex Ramirez. The bench, if Vientos is starting, would be Guillorme, Nido, because I said we're going to bring him back as the backup catcher. Parada's the third catcher who can get some time maybe at first, get some time maybe in a pinch out in the left, but really a DH type. And then the other guy on your bench, along with those three, Guillorme, Nido, Parada, would be Jake Mangum as my fourth outfielder. Now, this is, again, filling out a roster on homegrown talent. I think he has a chance to be a quality MLB fourth outfielder for some time, so we'll put him in that final spot. All of that gives us 13 position players, so you still have to fill out the roster with 13 pitchers. Who could be in the starting rotation when it comes to homegrown talent and what's left over for the bullpen? We'll discuss all of that in just a minute, but first, another word from our sponsors. All right, so the starting rotation. Who do you have moving forward from this Mets system? Well, in the 40 currently, you still have Peterson, McGill, and Budo. I think that solidifies the back end of your rotation for the foreseeable future. I like Budo. I think Budo could be a swingman as soon as this season. I could see Budo filling that Trevor Williams role. I think McGill and Peterson both will solidify themselves as big league starters by 2025. I think Peterson's already there. This next couple years is going to be a really important time for McGill, and I think both of them have upside to ascend to be a number 3 starter by 2025. I like Peterson growing a little bit more now than I do McGill. Had a really nice season, struck out a lot of batters. I can see him continuing to progress, but it could be either of them. Beyond those 3, Dominic Hamill is the first name that bears mentioning. He was promoted from St. Lucie to start the season to High A Brooklyn this year. Actually got better with the promotion. Had a 2.59 ERA and 11 starts in Brooklyn. Strikeout per 9 went from 10.1 to 12. Whip went down. So his whip ended up at 1.08 after being closer to 1.3 at the beginning of the season. And when you combine everything, he was up to 119 innings pitched. So he's another guy who boasts really good spin rates, and that's what everyone loves now. But the fact that he's striking out a lot of batters and was in High A striking out 12 per 9, that's a great sign. And he has a chance to be a really nice pitcher and to be fast-tracked through the system a bit because, again, he's going to be 24. He's likely to probably pick up where he left off in High A, but maybe earn a quick promotion to double. And once you're there, anything can happen. Now, if Hamill can be part of the rotation in 2024, your organizational depth right now would be Scherzer, assuming he doesn't opt out, because he could before that 2024 season. Peterson, McGill, Budo, Hamill. So that's 5 guys. Now, you'd like to have more than that. That's why the Mets are probably going to sign 2 pitchers to multi-year deals this offseason, adding to that depth, and suddenly you would have a core of 7, with Scherzer then dropping out of that mix after 2024. So maybe those 2 guys, whether it's DeGrom and Bassett, DeGrom and Senga, Rodon and Senga, whoever those 2 guys they add in, they would be then combined by the time you get to 2025 with some combination of Peterson, McGill, Budo, and Hamill, and the upside plays of 3 prospects that may or may not be up by 2025, but certainly present a higher ceiling than everyone we just mentioned, except for maybe Hamill. Hamill, I think we're still not entirely sure what he could become. But the 3 prospects that you're really pinning your hopes to, if you're looking at the Mets farm system right now, it's Matt Allen, it's Blade Tidwell, and it's Calvin Ziegler. Matt Allen is in for a pivotal year. 3rd round pick in 2019, 1st round talent, got the big bonus. Pitched to a 2.61 ERA and 10 1/3 in 2019. Got good reviews in the alternate site in 2020. So that was the first 2 years of his minor league career, with the first one being limited because of, getting drafted and the time it took to sign and all that. Misses the year because of COVID. Everyone did. 2021, Would have been his first full year, but ends up needing Tommy John surgery. So goes down, misses all of 2021. Then he gets ulnar transposition surgery in January of 2022, and that takes him out for this season. Now, that surgery, it's a nerve surgery. It's very common after Tommy John. As pitchers, if they're healing and they're not feeling the correct recovery time after they throw, after they do their workouts, and there's still just that discomfort, you might have to have this additional surgery. We saw DeGrom get it when he was a prospect. Steven Matz got it, and Zach Wheeler got it. So this is not new. This is very common. In all those pitchers, you were looking at 2 full years missed. Matt Allen just went through that. So now we are in this mode where it's time for Allen to get some innings under his belt, build himself back up, and you can finally start to dream about what he could be. To look at the 2 most obvious comparisons, though, DeGrom and Matz both had Tommy John surgeries before they really got going in their minor league careers, just like Matt Allen. For DeGrom, by the time he finally returned, 24 years old, made 19 starts, pitched 111 and a third with a 2.43 ERA. This is his first full year back from Tommy John. Second full year, 4.51 ERA, 26 starts made, 147 and 2/3 innings pitched. So the innings climbed, which is good, but he struggled. 2014, ends up making his MLB debut, wins Rookie of the Year. Altogether between AAA and the big leagues, 178 and 2/3 in 29 starts. So year 3 is when he became Jacob deGrom, coming off the Tommy John. That is when he was able to have a full workload as well and be a major league starting pitcher. Steven Matz, 19 when he had Tommy John, made 6 starts. Before that, 1.55 ERA, 29 innings pitched. Then makes 21 starts, was 19 when he had Tommy John. And then that 29 innings pitched, the 6 starts with 1.55 ERA, that was his first year back after the Tommy John. He never pitched before the Tommy John in the minors. Comes back, following year, starts 21 games, 2.62 ERA, 106 in the third innings pitched. At that point, he was 22 years old. The third year was 2014 for him. He pitched to a 2.24 ERA, 140 and 2/3. So that was his first 3 years off the Tommy John, the first year being a very small sample size of 6 starts. Third full year back was 2015 when he made his MLB debut. So 105 and a third innings pitched, 35.2, or the 105 and a third in the minors, 35 and 2/3 with the Mets in the regular season, 14 and 2/3 in the playoffs, 155 and 2/3 altogether. So this leads us back to Allen. Following both DeGrom and Matz in their first full season, you were looking at 100 innings pitched, a little bit over that. So that's what you want this year. Expect Allen to start in St. Lucie, likely end up in Brooklyn and High A. Get him over 100. Year 2, AA, AAA could maybe even dream if everything worked right and there was a need at the end of the season in the rotation, maybe. But more than likely, he will go through a full 2024 where he would remain in the minors. And the goal would be to get him over 140 innings pitched like DeGrom had and also like Matt said. Then 2025 would be his first full season in a rotation where you can expect, 28 to 32 starts, 150 to 180 innings pitched. That's when he could be a contributor at the big league level right on this timeline. So he's important. Blade Tidwell is 21, second round pick this past year. St. Lucie is probably where he's going to start next year. Maybe he could be promoted quickly to High A. He's a guy that could get fast-tracked a little bit here. I think 2024, the earliest we see him if he doesn't get hurt prior. 2025, more likely. But he's a nice option for the Mets. Guy can strike out a lot of batters. Speaking of strikeouts, you get to Calvin Ziegler, maybe the biggest unknown. Well, I don't know. Maybe Matt Allen has taken that title with all the time he's missed. But Ziegler is just this insane spin darling who advanced metrics love, where we heard as soon as the Mets drafted him that they loved this kid. And, what we saw in his first season is they protected him a lot. They pitched him once a week, never threw over 80 pitches in an outing out there. He really was sheltered, but he struck out 13.5 batters per 9, did walk 6.8, so the stuff is nasty. It's unhittable. Can he refine his approach a little bit? cut those walks, keep the strikeouts where they are. Even if he's not going to be a starting pitcher, as they're still going to try right now, I see him as a clear reliever. Ziegler just sounds like a reliever anyway. So I could see him ending up in the pen. But regardless of the players that we discussed so far, Peterson, McGill, Budo, Hamill, Allen, Ziegler, Tidwell, that's 7 of your 13 pitchers. Edwin Diaz will be one of them. That's 8. Montes de Oca, we never know, but we'll throw him in there. That's 9. I have Grant Hartwig, Christian Scott, Mike Vassell, and Eric Orrs as the rest of these guys. I think that is really where you see the fall off. I think these guys all have the chance to be quality big league veterans, but I'm not looking outside of Deaca with his insane stuff. There's no one in the Hartwig, Scott. I mean, Scott maybe a little bit, but none of those guys seem to be the next Edwin Diaz closer type. Like Ziegler, maybe, but that would push him out of the rotation. So regardless, those are some of the pitchers in the pipeline to think about. But the bottom line here is when we're looking at the Mets farm system, the position player angle, you can see a long-term need in the outfield. That is for sure. But not one that immediately has to be addressed because you still have Marte, because you still have Canna, and because you know that after the next 2 seasons, you might have an Alex Ramirez, you might have a Ronny Mauricio playing in the outfield. And Jake Mangum could be a nice 4th outfielder. So that's where you're at with the position players. Obviously, the rotation needs help. You need frontline starters. That's what the Mets are going to try to sign this offseason. And the bullpen long-term, all you really know is Edwin Diaz. But most teams, that is really all you know, is that closer. So we'll see where the Mets go from here, but I had a lot of fun really trying to think ahead to what this team will look like in 2025. That's going to be all, though, for today's edition of Locked On Mets, this week on Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports Today is where you should go to stay up to date with everything going on in the sports world. You follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.